rain is pretty nice out there. For those of you who don't know me, which I see most everybody knows me, I'm Kevin Goss, your local supervisor for here in District 2 in Greenville. With us today we have our District Attorney David Hollister, Alexis Klein, Deputy District Attorney, Jessica Beatley, and Jeff Wilkinson there in the back. They'll be presenting in just a moment. We're going to have a couple of more presenters also, James Reichel and the CSD manager, Jesse Lawson, sorry. Just drawing blanks in. Anyhow, sorry for the heat in here. I have no idea what's going on, but that thing will not shut off. Try to get a hold of some folks to try and turn it off because it's remotely operated. But hopefully it won't get too warm. Start with Jesse. I'm going to kind of give you a timeline.
It's an informational meeting. The point is to try to get information out to everybody, exactly what happened, put everything in context, try to define and clearly communicate to everybody where we've identified the problems might be. I put together a timeline history, and this kind of talks about the district. We talk about a series of events that allowed this to happen, that allowed it to happen for so long. Describes when it was caught and what the reactions were. I'm just going to kind of read over this. Indian Valley Community Services District was formed in '74 when the Fire Protection District, the Sewers, and the Lighting Districts all come together and formed the Greenville Community Services District. That district remained pretty small. You can read with this. The district remained very small in scope and in people and just physical size for a long time, all the way to '93. And they did pick up the park, Greenville Park in there. From '93 to 2003, the district exploded. It picked up, I have it written here because I won't remember. It picked up the Taylorsville Fire Department, our district. It picked up the Taylorsville Sanitation, Taylorsville Park, Taylorsville Pool, Taylorsville Lighting, Crescent Mills Water, Greenville Water. Greenville Sanitation also expanded 3 times in that decade. So there was a massive growth without a matching administrative part to it. In 2003, the general manager, who was general manager for the entire time, stepped down. A new general manager came in January 2003. By March 2003, the board resolved to remove all financial control from the county and bring it in-house. They made the general manager, the CSD's treasurer, controller, 2003. It wasn't long after that, by 2006, the district was in huge debt. All the projects happened in town here. Most of the bank accounts were used up, and most of the reserves were used up. So what I'm trying to describe is a situation in 2005 where this timeline begins. This timeline, the dates on here, are pulled directly from the public record. Each one of these dates is minutes, and they're available online. If you go to the district website, IndianValleyCSD.com. And the public records are scanned in, the minutes are scanned in. They have text recognition to them, they're searchable. And so this is, I'm trying to provide, if anybody wants to do research or take a look at the history, this is a guide where you can pull information out. They put all these things in context. So real quickly, in 2005, June, John Bissell, who was a district accountant, warned the district that it'd be out of money by February 2006. July 2005, a financial crisis was declared and options to get out of it were discussed. Line of credit was opened in December. January, they lost some tax revenue. March 2006, Joe Wilson resigns. Tried to come up with a debt recovery plan, talked about rate increases, surcharges, recommended by the accountant. In June, the USDA warned of receivership. In other words, the federal government was going to come in and take over the district. July, there's a rate increase. October 11, 2006, Leanna Moore, the bookkeeper, was authorized as a point of contact in dealing with grants and loans. Right? Still had no general manager. November, there's two interviews for general manager, no action taken, still no general manager. In January, general manager position is still unfilled until Leanna Moore was hired as the interim general manager because they couldn't get anybody else or for whatever reason. I'm trying hard not to jump to conclusions, just put this out. By March, the federal government states they are pleased with the financial progress and they might release more funds. That's stated in the minutes. They sold the old office building for $95,000 in April. Credit lines were paid off in May. Surcharges were removed from bills. July, Leanna was hired as the general manager, permanent. Streetlight charges were removed from bills. Also, the last payment to rural development was made, and it was announced that the reserves were brought up to date. It's 2007. August 2007, Taylorsville saw sewer. There was a rate increase discussed. September, board member roles were discussed. December, Greenville water rates discussed. February 2008, the funding for the membrane treatment plant in Greenville was secured. It was a $2 million grant, which grew as the cost went up. Funding secured for a well at the water plant. Insurance rates were reduced because the amount of training the crew was attending was all documented, which helped us drop insurance rates. Got a grant for $1 million from the state to help with the federal loans for the membrane water plant. Water management efforts began. Audits completed July 9th, 2008. In December 2008, Leanna Moore received a review. The board did an evaluation with her, and they seek information from outside sources. The federal government, and Mike Holbert, John DeSell, kind of a financial advisor for the district, and the county, PCCDC. They all gave her very high marks. They all said she was doing a really good job. That was December 2008. January 2009, total $2.5 million in grant money for membrane plant. September, state took another 8% tax revenue. 2009, audits were conducted as reported. Attempts to recover that property's tax that was taken from the state. In February 2010, credit line was extended to pay contractors at the water plant, stating that state payments were slow. August 2010, we received a $526,000 check from the state as part of the loan repayment, or the grant. That was a grant coming from the state to the district. Between August 2010 and April 2011, there wasn't a whole lot going on. The membrane treatment plant project was being finished up, and that kind of took over the meetings. There wasn't much financial discussion. In August 2011, the board received notice that they're having trouble paying the insurance premiums. In November, the IRS levied $56,000 from the district accounts. The county sent all the property tax money that's supposed to come to the district, went directly to the IRS. It was discovered in January 2012 that 2 years worth of dam inspection fees were not paid. The state was contacting the district to the tune of $10,000. February, we're working with the USDA to make loan payments, but because of the IRS levies, we could not make our federal loan payments due every November. We're facing receivership again. March 2012, independent financial review requested by the board. Leanna announced her resignation. April, Leanna requests boards and responsibilities letter from legal counsel. There's a letter from legal counsel to the board describing the board's limits and responsibilities. Leanna was claiming harassment. May, board contacts auditors, discovers no audit since 2008. Frank Richardson hired as general manager. June, general manager reports financial irregularities. A third-party bookkeeper was hired. And July, auditor discussed third-party bookkeeper is now processing all checks. And the suspected fraud reported to Plumas County District Attorney July 18, 2012. This is when we handed everything over to this team.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. I'd like to mention before, if we could just hold our questions till the end, and then we'll be able to have a question and answer session. Go ahead, Dave.
Kevin, thank you.
You bet.
Again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. It was difficult the last time we spoke because we were confined in a number of ways from discussing the case in detail. What I've done is I've brought a few things for you to take a look at, including a variety of pieces of evidence from the case itself. So I can give you an idea of what was going on, what evidence we found, what we recovered, what we were presented, and what ultimately led to the conviction. I'm happy to answer questions whenever Kevin says it's a good time to do that. I do want to just point out, these cases are difficult. This is one of the reasons I asked Jessica Beatley and Jeff Wilkinson to come with me, These are our 2 investigators for the entire county. This is our investigation unit for the District Attorney's Office. They handle cases from the Sheriff's Office, CHP, Fish and Game, Union Pacific Railroad. Every agency that would submit a criminal case, they help with the follow-up investigation. So the fact that they were able to put everything aside and work this case up was just a tremendous asset to this county and in our ability to prosecute this case. I also want to thank the general managers at the district, from Joe Wilson to Frank Richardson to Jesse Lawson. They have been cooperative every single step of the way. Anything we asked for, even Joe Wilson, who had been removed from jobs and was working elsewhere, when we asked him questions, he always responded. So they were all very helpful. And in particular, the board. Not once was there a problem getting information from the board or having the board cooperate with our process. We didn't have to issue subpoenas or do anything like that. There was a lot of cooperation. I'm very appreciative of that. I also want to note that I'm thankful to Mr. Reichel for his efforts. I reviewed the comments that he's going to make, and I just want to let you know I agree with them wholeheartedly. And we're doing what we can to assist him in recovering what assets are out there so that hopefully the district can get some of this money back. Let me just talk about the timeline when we started doing what we do, which is filing a criminal complaint. That is a charging document that accused Leanna Moore of a crime. At that time, we believed the loss to be $381,000. She was arraigned on November 22nd, 2013. A couple days later, the judge lowered the bail to $100,000 cash, meaning if she put up $100,000 in cash, she could get out of custody. She did that. On March 21st, 2014, she was arraigned on an amended complaint. And that's because a second audit was concluded, and that was done by John Bro. And that demonstrated to us that the loss wasn't $381,000, but when you add those other few years that he looked at, we were up to $622,000. When we went to the preliminary examination on June 18th, 2014, we were able to demonstrate a loss to the judge of over $676,000. I believe, to the best of our ability, we were able to capture and prove all the loss that was out there. There are other things that we may not have been able to get our hands on, but as far as the evidence we received and what we could get to, that was the loss that we were able to prove. 2 days later, she came in, Ms. Moore, and pled no contest to the judge. She took us out of the equation. There was no plea bargain. There was no, if you do this, you'll get this. She pled guilty or no contest to every charge that was alleged, including the white collar enhancement. She was sentenced September 24th, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. What I'd like to do, if I can, and Jesse covered this, I won't talk about the hiring of Ms. Moore. That was in 2007 as a general manager, but this is, again, some of the evidence that was from the hearing. At the hearing, in order to get to $676,000, we basically found embezzlement in 4 distinct areas. There was payroll fraud of over $420,000. That is essentially creating extra paychecks to herself. There was credit or debit card fraud, and that is where she basically took out a card on the district's name, but where the bills went to herself and everything was shipped to her residence in Winnemucca. There were gas card fraud. There was gas card fraud, and that was about $8,900. And finally, there were forgeries, where she forged the names of directors on checks that were made out to herself. Altogether, there was $676,375.60. There were at least 847 different transactions, and this theft occurred during this 5-year period. When we're talking about putting this case together, and I wanted to note my thanks, this pile over here in front of Ms. Beatley, those are the documents that led us to these numbers. It was a matter of going through and really going through each line item and figuring out exactly what was a loss and what wasn't. And again, Jesse Lawson and Frank Richardson in particular were instrumental in helping us get these documents so we could work through them. When we're talking about payroll fraud, basically we're talking about a fairly consistent period, and you can see the embezzled payroll started fairly discreetly in 2006, 2007 of about $7,800. By 2010, 2011, she was taking in the neighborhood of $161,000 in extra payroll. So her $50,000 job turned into a $210,000 job. These were payments that were being conducted on software that she exclusively handled, where the checks were going directly to her. So it wasn't a process where there were other people involved, other people signing off on it. She was able to manipulate this so that they went directly to her. There was some argument at the hearing from Ms. Moore's attorney about what the true amount was. There was a suggestion that no, she was entitled to this certain amount, and the fact of the matter was, at the end of the hearing, the judge found that not to be true, and that she was good for what we were alleging. The second audit was fairly instrumental in this. You'll see the last 2 years that John Grove captured, 2010, 2011, 2011, 2012, there was another $102,000. And from that, we gained, all told, for that time period, almost $340,000 more dollars. So this was an important case where, even though we had initially filed charges, it was important that we were able to keep working the case and able to get that amount ordered in restitution. So we got to the full $622,000. Eventually became $676,000. This is one area that's going to bother you. It still bothers me. Ms. Moore was able to acquire what amounted to a debit card that had a Visa logo. So it was essentially a credit card as well. She had pretty much exclusive use of the bills that came to the district. So they came directly to her. The items she ordered using these, she had shipped to her residence. So it was, in its simplest terms, it was no different than the identity theft that we see throughout the country every day. She created a scenario that was just exclusive to her. It was a closed universe. The bills didn't go somewhere else. The shipping didn't go somewhere else. Everything came through her and to her exclusively. With this type of fraud, we saw $105,000 in loss, 563 different transactions over that 4-year period. Everything from Amazon, which was enormous, $48,000, to See's Candy, to Shield Sports, to all sorts of things. What we did is we were able to capture those particular records from Amazon to see what she was spending the money on, to make sure that they worked for district uses. And what we found, I think probably shocked us all. First of all, we found that the items were being billed to the district, but being shipped to her residence in Winnemucca, and that the phone numbers given, if there was a problem, were her personal phone numbers. So again, that closed universe to make sure nobody could detect what was going on. This is an example of one of the bills that we saw. And again, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of pages. And we started seeing things like a Life is Good Boy Stone Sherpa hooded jacket. And it was clear these items weren't for the district's use. We saw things like a Coleman Road Trip Grill, again, a barbecue. Women's Galaxy Groove Pants and women's Snow Glimmer Soft Shell Jacket. So it was very evident these were things that were just going for her personal gain and her personal use. A Fossil Ladies Leather Strap Watch. From Amazon, we saw things like the Wicked Wahini Bath Salts. So that you could tell by these purchases that there was no restraint. There was no little voice in her head saying, this is wrong. She was just buying whatever she wanted. We were also chagrined to find out during the hearing when she testified that the bulk of these things that she ordered were never even opened, and were either thrown away or discarded or given away. This was a situation, and Jessica and Jeff and I have worked cases like this before, embezzlement cases, where there's a substance abuse problem, there's a gambling problem, there's some vice there that leads to this. What was shocking in this case was there was no vice. This was just greed. This was just consumerism, just buying stuff. Again, as we went through the records, we saw additional items, iPads, ordering 6, 7, 8 iPad touches at a time. And then we'd see different things. Not only only goods, but things like the Atlantis Casino and the Grand Sierra Resort. We looked at gambling records, but there was nothing there. They were just vacations or trips. Our investigations unit was able to track down photographs of where that money was being spent, whether it be the forged checks or the extra payroll. And we found that they were able to take vacations to NASCAR races, cruise to the Bahamas, trip to Disney World. So we saw just this lifestyle that was above and beyond what any general manager at any district would ever have. The third area was gas card fraud. The district was very explicit with Ms. Moore that while she could live in Winnemucca, she was not going to be paid to commute. She was not entitled to hours while she was driving, nor was she entitled to money for her gas. What we ended up finding was about $8,900 in charges, where again, she got one of the gas cards, closed the universe, so only she was getting the bills. She was paying the bills using the district's money and maintaining that secrecy. I think Mr. Reichel and Jesse will probably tell you how much people suffered. The ratepayers suffered because of this, and the workers suffered because of this. The employees got smaller, and so, we went from 15 to 4. We couldn't fix things. People, Jesse's using his own truck to do work out there. And the money that was supposed to go for these things was going to things like her gas, her trips, and the goods she was buying. We tried to look into, was anyone else complicit in this? And when I say complicit, it's one thing for me to say, oh, this person must have known about it. That doesn't get me anywhere in my job. My job is I have to be able to prove, in order to charge a crime, somebody committed a certain act or committed a crime beyond a reasonable doubt with admissible evidence. So my hunches or my beliefs don't amount to anything. I've got to be able to prove it or not prove it. One of the things we looked very hard at, and let me see if I can't blow this up for you. One of the gas purchases on April 18th was at 12:13, followed by another one at 12:14. It became very clear to us that what she was doing was filling her own vehicle and then filling someone else's vehicle with gas as well. So we tried to take a look and see if there was a way to charge anyone else who may have benefited from this. In the end, the evidence leads us to the conclusion that Ms. Moore acted alone in this. While others may have known about it, there's not enough for us to prosecute somebody in our jurisdiction for those crimes. So we did take a look at that as hard as we could. The check forgery, just to give you an idea, and there's two parts I want to touch on. This was really a major way that she overcompensated herself. The 139 checks that she forged amounted to about $140,000. At the time, the district had something called an HRA program, or a healthcare reimbursement account. I used to work in Oakland. We called ours a cafeteria account. What would happen is the county would give you $1,000, and if your kid had to get braces, you pay for it, and then they'd reimburse you. In Alameda County, it was a pretty high cafeteria account. It's a big, fairly well-off county. I think when I left 12 years ago, I think it was about $2,000. She had created this HRA account for herself. In 2008 alone, she drew $5,700 from it. So she was, she was mindful about what she was doing and how she was getting to this money. Her primary way of forging checks was to use a stamp that belonged to Mr. Schrammel that she was not supposed to use. In fact, the evidence at the hearing showed that there was conversation about this is never to be used. What she would do is make the checks, let me see if I can give you an example. Make the checks out to herself. She'd use John's stamp over and over and over again. And again, she kept the closed universe. The check would go directly to her. She'd deposit it in her personal account. When the account statement came in, she would then take those numbers, she would put them into the software program she was using, change them, so that if anyone ever looked at it, there would be nothing wrong. Everything would look nice and tight with the numbers. As things unraveled, she destroyed the laptop that had that information on so that this couldn't be tracked down. In fact, the district had to spend not only a great deal of money, but a great deal of hours trying to recreate these 4, 5, 6 years that this was going on. So there was a very high level of sophistication in what she was doing. In fact, at sentencing, one of the aggravating factors that the judge found was a high level of sophistication in how she carried out this fraud. So we saw about $140,000 in checks such as that. There were some other directors that had their names forged. We were able to demonstrate that at the hearing as well. In the end, the judge sentenced her to every second he could. That was 10 years in state prison. He ordered a fine of $1.2 million, which was about the most he could order, and he ordered restitution in the amount of $1.1 million. That not only covered the direct loss, but the indirect loss. So it not only covered what she stole, but also the damage she did by stealing it. Mr. Reichel did a terrific job of presenting the indirect loss as part of that sentencing hearing. I know you will have questions. I'm going to do my best to answer them. I can tell you everything you've seen here has been something that was shown during a hearing in open court. So there's no big secrets here. I'll do my best to answer your questions. There are some things I have to tell you that I just won't know. I know what the admissible evidence is. I know the avenues we checked, the avenues we didn't check, and there aren't many of those. The work that went into putting this case together, and I'm happy to share those with you. I don't want to build up expectations that I'm going to be able to answer the whys. Why would somebody do this? You know, I couldn't tell you. Anyways, thank you very much for your time and attention. I know there's, I think, Kevin, you're going to introduce Mr. Reichel.
I think, Jesse, did you want to finish up, or are you?
Yeah, I'll finish up.
Okay.
Timeline. Thanks. I wanted to finish the timeline up to current date, September 24, 2014. You remember we had a workout plan, Leanna requests for board responsibilities, claims harassment, board contacts auditors, no audits, Frank hired, financial irregularities, third-party bookkeeper processes all checks, suspected fraud reported to Plumas County. August, board issues a press release about fraud. All bank statements are now examined monthly. Bank statements now go directly to a P.O. box. It's accessible by the board. It's not accessible in the office. I don't have any access to them until they make their way into the office where they're then public document. Anybody can look at them. August 8th, also the USDA loan extension. Auditors were hired. A forensic audit was started, which was helpful in getting the amount elevated. Number of checking accounts was reduced from 11 to 3. General manager announced his resignation. I was acting GM at that point. December 2012, board attends multiple trainings, annual audits started, additional workout agreements. December, I was hired officially as interim GM. January, we joined Plumas County Special Districts Association, California World Water. January, Finance Committee meets with auditors. What you'll see if you go down this timeline is you'll see training and controls put into place. Finance Committee meeting with bookkeepers, board and GM attend training, Finance Committee with bookkeepers, training, loan payments made, board clerks, training. It's here in front of you if you want to go down to it. And this ends September 24th. District was awarded 1.1 in restitution. Leanna said it's 10 years. I made this handout to provide everybody a guide if they wanted to look at district minutes or the public record. Some key things I thought were key things, and also you can put them in context. There's other things that happen at these times. I pulled this information out. So like I said, if you go on the website, you go to June 11th, 2013 minutes, you will find this item that I've put here, and you'll find it in context. That's all I have.
Thanks, Jesse. We'll have James.
Yeah.
Next. Seriously.
I wrote something up, a two-sided analysis, if you will, and I'd ask people to take enough for their row and then pass the rest back. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to just get a few highlights. But I just want to make it clear that although I volunteered to represent the district in trying to get the maximum amount of restitution, I'm not here tonight representing the district or the board in any way. I asked for the opportunity to be allowed to make some comments because I think this is one of those things they call a teachable moment, when you get people's attention. And I think there's a few things in the larger context that need to be understood here, so that this board, boards in the future, whoever's on the board, is not going to be in a position to have this happen again. So basically, when I got involved, you know, I've been a lawyer who's worked a lot in public law for almost 30 to 40 years now, for Northern California counties, county council, council to special districts. I've worked with special districts in a lot of capacities, especially here in Plumas and Sierra County. And I think because of that, what I'm trying to do is put this in the context of the experiences that I've had with other boards and other districts. And basically, I think there's a few points here that were sort of critical into how and why this happened. Just to give you an idea of how the district grew from a small Greenville district into providing basically almost all the community services in Indian Valley. And when that happened, there were issues of facilities needing upgrades. There were a number of issues that new requirements, that there had to be a lot of financing. And for reasons that I have not been able to understand, there may be an explanation there somewhere. But from the time IVCSD was formed in '93 to 2003, the county auditor was the treasurer, and all financial transactions were handled by the county. There was some, elected official who was totally independent of the district who was doing all the finances. And for some reason, effective April 1st, 2003, which I find an interesting coincidence, the then board in 2003 decided to cut their ties with the county, take all the money back, and they hired Leanna as a bookkeeper. Now what they did was basically open the doors to allow somebody to manipulate the finances, and that's what happened. So I think that was a critical point where a decision was made to take on to a district that had expanded, and at that time, the longtime general manager, Jim Hamlin, resigned that position, and somebody else took over. Between 2000 and the second thing that I find interesting is that during the period of 2003, when the ties to the county as the treasurer for the district were cut, in 2006, there was an incredible turnover. Nobody who was on the board in 2003 and cut those ties was still there at the beginning of 2006. They'd gone through 3 general managers. There was no continuity in the district during that critical period of time when debt built up, when a lot of things had to be done. There was simply nobody there who had the continuity, the length of experience to say, okay, this is how we've done it. It was like a fresh start. The only constant was Leanna Moore, who was hired as bookkeeper in 2003 and who was still there in 2006. So this created an interesting opportunity between the turnover in the board and the turnover in management. There simply weren't people who had experience working with the district. So basically, that created the situation that created the opportunity for somebody, as Leanna Moore proved to be, who took advantage of that situation. Now, after the 2007-2008 fiscal year, Leanna Moore discontinued the required independent audits. There's a requirement in the government code saying the district has to either have the county auditor or an independent qualified auditor to come in and audit the books every year. And there has to be a report filed on that within 12 months afterwards. She essentially told the board, well, these things have been done, but we can't pay the auditor. We can't afford to pay him, so I can't get you copies. And that was a problem, because I don't frankly think the board should have accepted that. They should have done something. Would it have made any difference? I don't know. The 2006-07 and 2007-08 were audited. She stole over $30,000 during that period of time, and they didn't catch her. She, as a judge found, she was very sophisticated. I talked to John DeSell, who was a contract accountant who did projects for the district. He helped train her. everybody thought, and I think it was probably true, as bookkeeper she was very competent. She was dealing with it, she knew what she was doing, and she gained and learned how to do what she started doing, and she became general manager. So, given the fact that Leanna was effective in negotiating to obtain grants and loans for needed financing in the district, because frankly, Jesse Lawson, the water operator, did a lot to improve the efficiency of operation in the district. It appeared, at least early on, that she was a really good general manager. So, what I believe happened in part is Leanna understood a fundamental reality. For small district boards, it's very typical for everything to go through the general manager. The general manager is the conduit for matters to go to the board. She had total control on that gate, especially when she got rid of the external audits. So everything that came to the board came through Leanna Moore. She had total control. And that was, you know, she had local credibility. She'd grown up here. She was known to people. But that was the situation. So those are the factors that, in looking at this situation, that I think contributed to why this came down. Obviously, there was a person who took advantage of this situation. It didn't have to happen. If somebody was honest, you know, none of these circumstances would have made any difference. They simply created an opportunity that made it easier for somebody to get away with it. And the point here is that we don't elect lawyers and accountants to these boards. You know, we elect people with basic experience in a lot of different ways. And I believe that in this instance, and in terms of experience I've had over the years, that it's really critical, especially for small boards with lay board members, that they have external, independent oversight, if you will. They don't make their own legal opinions about what the law requires them to do. They ask Greg Einhorn, who's a longtime specialist in special district law, what do we have to do here, Greg? And he tells them. And in the same sense, I think it's equally essential that they have financial consultation to do the same thing for practices in compliance with the law. So there are mechanisms to prevent this kind of disaster. For instance, the external audits that ceased in 07, 08, and didn't start again until 2012, are required to be filed with the county auditor and the state controller. But as far as we can tell, nobody reported to the district until 2012 that at least 3 of those audits had not been filed. The audit reports were not filed. So you can't rely on remote parties who don't have an interest in what's going on. So I think, you know, Jesse sort of mentioned some of them. I think this board has effectively prevented this kind of thing from happening again. They've replaced the county treasurer with Bernard and Associates, who are performing that function of handling the money, dispersing the checks and everything. They've gotten rid of debit and credit cards. There's no ability for employees to have expenditures. And as Jesse mentioned, they've got the checks, copies of the checks and the statements coming directly to the board for their analysis. So, you know, at this point, it seems secure. My one recommendation, other than paying attention to the need for external advice, is I'm suggesting that the board adopt what's essentially a compliance schedule. We know that for equipment and facilities, there's a maintenance schedule. You have to do certain things to keep things running. And I think it would be good for future boards if the board would adopt a annual compliance schedule that says by this time we need the external audit, we need our conflict of interest code, and every year look at that and set timelines and dates to prevent this kind of thing from dropping out in the past. So basically, that's what I wanted the opportunity to say. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. I think how we'll do, we'll just go around the room. If anybody has any questions, please stand and direct who you would like to ask the question to, and we'll just do it. John Scheller.
The fines and the restitution, any chance, I mean, are there assets there, and if so, what are the chances of getting them, how much?
We're taking, John, good question, and it's nice to see you this evening, although I know that the fish are, it's about time to get out there. John and I fished together a little I'm working with Mr. Reichel. We've been able to do what amounts to an asset check with some law enforcement tools so we can dig a little bit deeper. So I'll be working with the district and Mr. Reichel to see what assets are out there. And anything that's out there, I'm convinced we'll be able to figure out what they are, where they are, and who are best to go.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult. If she was clever enough to do what she did here, I'm sure she didn't leave things hanging in her name. I think it's going to come down to, after some effort to pursue the leads, it's going to come down to whether the board wants to continue indefinitely to pursue those leads, or whether the board may choose to invest in sharing the proceeds with what effectively would be like a bounty hunter to to use the resources that I had preliminary contact with an attorney in Vegas who's a collection attorney. That sounds to me like a good source, but I don't know. At this point, it's impossible to tell. I mean, we're probably going to get $5 a month from the Department of Corrections while she's in prison. That's the only sure thing we know.
John, the other part of it is, as far as the money that's owed, whatever's collected goes to restitution first. So any money that's received goes to the district first. The other thing is that the restitution order becomes a civil judgment. So it's a judgment that lasts forever, for whatever that's worth. Yes, sir.
Have you ever heard of House Resolution 192, Chapter 48, Statute 112?
I was just reading that. No, I haven't.
Well, it's basically on the Universal Commercial Code.
Sure.
Each one of us has a straw man, which in 1938 is when they went to 50 states, the Universal Commercial Code. Prior to that, 1933, Roosevelt put us into bankruptcy. And Congress passed this joint resolution. Basically, each American has an account with the government that's got money in it. And if we go use the UCC 1 or the UC3, I'm still studying it. Maybe you might want to do a little research on it, because it may be $1 million or more in each personal account that we can draw from. And I've got a copy here that says all debts are paid. And maybe you want to do a little research and maybe look into her account. If this is true, from what I can see it is, you'll have to look up her SS5 number and Social Security, I guess that's what it is, ID number, to find out what she has in her account and all this stuff, which each one of us in the United States has, according to what Roosevelt and the Congress in 1933 put through.
No, I'm happy to take a look at whatever you have. I can tell you that I've always had a great deal of difficulty getting any money out of the government, so
well,
I'll do my best there.
I know, but the thing is, I'm trying to find a way to save the district money, and if this is true, each one of us, if we wanted to draw out of this account, we can do it.
Sure.
I'm researching it.
No, I appreciate it. If you'll share that with me when we're done, I appreciate it.
I mean, you'll have to do a lot yourself, but...
you give me the citations, I'll get right back. Thank you, Jackie.
Anybody else? Carol.
How realistic is 10 years that she's supposed to spend in state prison?
If you are convicted of a crime that's not classified as a violent felony, let me frame it a different way. If you're convicted of a violent felony, which she was not, you do 85% of the time. All other felonies, unless you have certain prior convictions, you do 50% of the time. So in reality, the expectation is she's going to do 5 actual years before she becomes eligible for release on post-release community supervision. Similar to parole, what parole used to be. I just candidly, I'm nervous about that number. I've been around long enough to see what's happened with our prisons, especially women in our prisons, and their early releases. So I cannot give you a guarantee. That's the state prison system is a function of the state government. My hope would be that she serves her full time, but I certainly wouldn't give you a guarantee on that. But it's out of my control.
So it would be 5 years at best.
At best, the most she can do, the most actual time she can do is 5 years. That's correct. Yes, John?
Well, as soon as she gets out, as soon as she should start working on the restitution.
That's, yes, agreed, agreed.
Let's get her out soon, get her to work.
That's right, Karen.
Is there a chance of, if she gets in the inheritance, which is kind of a bad thing to bring up, but can the district draw from an inheritance?
Yes.
And who keeps track of, to remember down the line that she owes you money?
That becomes a civil judgment, and how we think of it in any case where somebody has been victimized, they've been harmed, and the defendant owes them money, in my mind, inheritance, lottery winner, whatever, I want that civil judgment, so if it happens, we're in a position to recover. The reality is, in a small community like we're in, my hope would be that if she ever came into money, someone would know about it and would be able to track that down, but I'm sure the district would probably monitor that pretty well.
Right.
I have a question for Mr. Reisel. I have 2 or 3 questions. In your recommendations, and I agree completely, by the way, my name is Angela Lindley, and I'm with California Rural Water Association.
All right.
I travel all over Northern California visiting small water systems, so this is helpful for me to be able to help other communities as well who may be facing similar situations.
Or avoiding
Similar situations. One of the avoidance issues that I was wanting to know about, is it feasible, is it smart to bond people, for the board to bond people who have control over the money of the district?
Well, I can't answer that. What I can say is the district did have fraud insurance to cover this kind of thing, and actually there's a settlement discussion in process right now to recover money from the fraud insurer to help compensate the district for the loss. So that vehicle, bonding, I think, is going to be more an issue of how much you have to pay for the bond, and there is such a thing as fraud insurance, which apparently is going to be successful in returning some money to the district.
That was my next question.
Oh.
Whether or not the bond or the fraud insurance was something that this district actually had.
Yes.
That's awesome. Good.
I mean, there was a contest, there was a denial, an attorney was hired who's, I think, quite competent, and it appears that he's being effective, that there's a settlement being proposed.
I hope to be able to make an announcement.
Yeah, there's a meeting tomorrow night at 5
Okay.
for the board to consider that settlement.
Good. In your opinion, is a big part of the problem where this all began with the lack of continuity? I know you mentioned that at the beginning.
Yeah.
A lack of continuity. So how does a district avoid situations like that, where you lose an entire board, or you lose a general manager?
Well, it's, a lot of people don't last out their term in small districts. It's a fact of life. You see people who come and go with some frequency. It's one reason they stagger elections.
Right.
So it's 3-1 and 2 the next, in the hope that there's at least one who's been there a while when the new ones come in. So the only remedy that I can think of is, training is an issue for boards to understand their responsibility, and so boards know what to do. But I still go back to the idea that just like the district has counsel to advise them of the legal requirements of what they need to do to stay in compliance with state law, I think the same thing has to be done on a fiscal level, where there's advice from competent professionals to set up a schedule so that the board can periodically review at the board level whether or not those compliance matters are being complied with. So that was why I suggested a compliance schedule. So nothing would be dropped, there'd be a timeline, and you'd expect by this board meeting to have this done, and if not, it would trigger a flag and you would deal with it. So other than that, training is difficult for people who have jobs and lives. You can't train people to understand the operations of a complex community service district. It's just not realistic.
There has to be a certain amount of...
So a schedule and outside independent scrutiny, review, whatever you want to call it, consultation, is the best that I, in my experience, best I can think of doing.
And I just,
So, hey, yeah.
the transparency that Jesse spoke about is critical. And it's night and day. Where the district is now, as opposed to 2006, we had a heck of a time finding some of the records because Ms. Moore was able to discard some of the records. So the fact that things are posted, available, kept publicly, that I think is a pretty good safeguard as well.
And to kind of dovetail off of what James was saying, we at LAFCO commissioners, and teaming up with the Special Districts Association to put on more training locally here in Plumas County and in other counties for special district boards such as the CSD, cemetery districts, whatnot, all of them, to try and bring the training here so folks that are serving on the boards that have outside employment can make them regularly.
My only quibble with training, and I think
Well,
training is valuable, but I think all it does is give an overview, because trainers, especially professionals like lawyers and accountants, want to tell you everything for fear of leaving something out. I think the board needs like a 1 or 2 hour training on how to avoid financial disasters. It also helps to have the general training to understand the context in which you're working, but I think sometimes, we've all been subject to trainings, we've all struggled to stay awake through them. And I think you got to have something very concise, very basic, like, I hate to say it, but it's training for dummies kind of thing. If you take these steps, if you balance your checkbook, you don't overdraw. It's on that line.
And the back row.
Hi, this might be for Jesse. This question on deed dates. So forgive me if this question isn't appropriate for this arena. If it isn't, I'll take it to the water district. But I'm just trying to process all of this. So in all those years of monthly board meetings, there was never an expectation by anybody to see a bank statement. And if not, and because, back to high school, back to elementary school, every club I've ever belonged to, every 4-H, anything I've been involved with, we've always had to have bank statements. That was my first question. And then if there were no bank statements ever requested by any of the board, the financials, did she just change the date on the financial every month so that it showed the exact same balances? I'm just trying to process this closed system.
I can't answer that. I didn't pay attention. I know she handed financial statements. There was always financial statements in the board packet. I never looked at them. I was busy, boots on the ground, trying to handle oil harvests and things like that. I don't have an answer to that question. Trying to get a hold of board packets and that information, as was talked about, trying to get a hold of the documents to provide the district attorney's office. Things were I don't know what happened. A lot of the documents were filed in really creative way. You find a box that says,